Welcome to the Global War Watch Network. Russia has just launched a massive drone and missile strike on Kyiv, leaving 4 dead and more than 10 wounded in one of the heaviest bombardments in weeks.
Yeah, this specific strike really does demand immediate analysis. We've got a stack of reports here, and our task really is to synthesize this information. It's not just about the physical damage this time, though that's horrific. It's about understanding this deep strategic shift towards massive drone warfare.
And the economics behind it.
Exactly, the harsh economics driving it, and the serious geopolitical ripple effects we're now seeing across Europe. We need to understand the context of this event and why this acceleration in the air war matters to you right now.
Okay, let's start with the sheer scale. The September 27th and 28th assault, the numbers are just staggering. Reports are confirming this was, the third largest combined missile and drone strike of the entire war, lasting over 12 hours.
It was an incredible volume of incoming fire, yeah.
Yeah.
Ukrainian air defense tracked a total volley of 643 projectiles launched.
643, wow.
And to put that into perspective, the vast majority, 593 of those were drones, supplemented by about 50 missiles, including some pretty serious ones like the hypersonic Kh-47 M2 Kimzil and the long-range Kh-101 cruise missile.
643 munitions aimed mostly at cities. Even with really good defenses, that kind of volume guarantees some get-through. Ukrainian air defenses did claim an impressive success rate, though, reporting 611 total projectiles downed, including 566 drones.
That's right. But despite that defensive efficiency, the human cost was still catastrophic, and it confirms Russia's aim was, squarely on civilian targets. In Kyiv alone, we have 4 confirmed fatalities. That includes the tragic death of a 12-year-old girl.
Just awful.
And 2 people killed at Kyiv's Institute of Cardiology, a nurse and a patient. It just emphasizes the targeting of non-military infrastructure.
And the damage wasn't concentrated, was it? It spread across 5 major residential districts in the capital: Darnitsky, Svitoshinsky, Solomyansky, Holosivsky, and Dniprovsky. We're talking multi-story residential buildings hit, car fires, right in the middle of neighborhoods.
And that's just Kyiv. Nationwide, the casualty count went over 70 injured. Zaporizhia reported particularly heavy strikes. 38 people wounded there, including 3 children who needed hospital treatment.
And looking at the infrastructure damage, officials recorded over 100 civilian sites hit across the country. We've already mentioned the cardiology center, but also a kindergarten in Kyiv.
Sure.
And outside the capital, a wine plant in the Odessa region, a production shop and warehouse destroyed there.
Luckily, no casualties there. 50 workers were evacuated. But beyond the immediate blasts, these attacks apply systemic pressure. In Kyiv Oblast, for instance, over 2,500 civilians lost gas supplies, and roughly 580 lost electricity because of utility damage. It's a strategy designed for attrition, physical, psychological, and systemic.
Okay, so if Ukrainian air defenses are, as reported, intercepting the majority of these things, why are analysts still calling this a major strategic shift for Russia? What's the actual goal here if most are shot down?
That's the crucial question. Since about August 2024, Russia's air strategy has made a really decisive move. Some call it the strategic swap. Long-range drones now account for something like 95% of airstrikes aimed at civilian targets. They've basically realized the sheer quantity and, crucially, the low cost of these weapons give them an asymmetric advantage.
Right, I wanted to dig into that point, because the core of this new strategy seems almost purely economic. You mentioned it, the poor man's cruise missile idea.
Precisely. We're talking overwhelmingly about Shahed-type drones, or what Russia calls Jiran-2. These are OWA one-way attack drones. A single Shahed is estimated to cost somewhere between, say, $20,000 and $50,000. Now compare that to the cost of the interceptors needed to shoot them down.
Much higher, presumably.
Oh, yeah. Reports suggest that expensive missiles, like the British-supplied ASRAAM air-air missiles, sometimes adapted for surface launch, cost around $225,000 per unit.
So Russia forces Ukraine to spend maybe $250,000, sometimes more if you factor in multiple shots or operational costs, just to take out a $20,000 drone. That's the economic win.
That's it. And it's compounded by operational tricks. We see Russia deploying fake drones, basically cheap dummies with no explosives, just to confuse and overload air defense systems, force them to waste those valuable interceptors. And look, while Ukrainian electronic warfare, EW, things like jammers, has been effective, reportedly disabling up to 60% of Russian drones, the psychological goal is still this massive attrition.
That sheer volume. Sometimes over 100 drones in a single night. It feels designed just to terrorize people. I read one Kyiv resident describing the Shahed sound as like a huge lawnmower sound overhead. constantly.
And despite these continuous improvements in air defense efficiency, the hard reality is that civilian harm is actually rising. The UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine reported 6,754 civilians were killed or injured just in the first half of 2025. That's the highest half-year figure since the war began. So this strategy, this mass volume targeting vulnerable civilian infrastructure, it is succeeding in guaranteeing these awful casualty numbers.
So if sheer volume is the tactic, we have to ask, what's funding this enormous repetitive operation, and what are the wider geopolitical consequences?
Right. This is where the strategy moves off the battlefield and into global finance and politics. Immediately after these latest strikes, President Zelensky made a very specific claim. He said intelligence suggests Russia's shadow fleet of oil tankers, these older, often uninsured ships operating under foreign flags, are actually being used to launch and control Russian drones over European cities even.
That's a huge accusation, directly linking Russia's energy trade, their oil money, to these attacks. What was the call for action then?
Well, the Ukrainian leadership called for decisive international action. Tighter sanctions targeting Russia's energy trade, and specifically closing the Baltic Sea and other seas to this shadow fleet. The argument is that these vessels aren't just funding the war through oil sales, but might be actively facilitating the delivery and operation of these OWA drones against civilians.
The regional tension is certainly palpable. NATO countries had to react almost immediately, didn't they?
Absolutely. Neighboring Poland's scrambled fighter jets put its air defense systems on high alert. They even closed airspace near those key aid hub cities, Lublin and Rzeszów. This isn't just seen as Ukraine's problem anymore, it's perceived regional vulnerability.
And we're seeing broader patterns too, right? Reports of unidentified drones inside NATO airspace.
Yes, European officials have been reporting these incidents. Recent sightings in Denmark near military bases, the ones housing F-35s. And there were earlier violations reported in Estonia involving Russian MiG-31s. So, yeah, this airspace security issue is definitely expanding.
Which brings us, I suppose, to the political deadlock. While the technology and tactics of the war are escalating, the path to ending it seems, well, completely blocked.
It really is.
The political rhetoric seems to confirm that. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance stated recently that Russia has just refused to sit down for any bilateral or trilateral talks in the last few weeks. This was despite President Trump's reported efforts to mediate. Vance seemed to suggest Russia's refusal is just stubbornness, given their economic and battlefield situation.
But Russia's official position hasn't changed an inch, reflecting, a real unwillingness to compromise. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov just reiterated that Russia is only open to talks that address the root causes of the war. And for the Kremlin, that generally means these maximalist demands stopping NATO expansion, imposing their version of a neutralized Ukraine.
Yeah.
So both sides appear to be doubling down, really.
So recapping, this huge strike on Kyiv really underscores the strategic importance Russia is placing on cheap, massed drone warfare, aimed primarily at psychological attrition and hitting civilian targets.
Yeah, the clear takeaway is Russia prioritizing overwhelming quantity over precision. It's a way to try and neutralize Ukraine's improving air defenses and, tragically, to rapidly increase civilian casualties through sheer volume.
So as this war keeps evolving, what's the next critical shift we should be watching for in this air campaign? What's on the horizon?
Well, what we should all be thinking about now is the rapidly accelerating pace of military technology on both sides. Ukraine is developing countermeasures, yes, things like interceptor drones, but Russia isn't standing still either. The emergence of the jet-powered Shahed 238, which Ukrainian sources are calling the Geron 3 variant, well, that changes the calculus again.
Jet-powered? How fast are we talking?
These new drones are reportedly capable of speeds up to 520 kilometers per hour. Now, compare that to the standard, like 180 kilometers per hour of the older Shahed models. It's a massive jump. And that speed raises a really crucial question. What does that mean for the feasibility of mobile air defense units trying to track and hit targets moving that fast? And, maybe more importantly, how safe does that leave cities far from the front lines?
That is a critical thought on future security. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Thank you for walking us through these complex reports and the implications.
My pleasure. It's important to track these shifts.
Indeed. And thank you all for your time and participation in this analysis. If you found this discussion insightful, please do remember to like, share, and subscribe to the Global War Watch Network. We also encourage you to share your thoughts in the comment section below and join us on social media. You'll find the links provided in the description. Thanks for listening.